Imagine waking up tomorrow and finding out your country's money no longer matters beyond your border. The cash in your wallet still buys things at home, but outside your country, nobody wants it. Trade slows, imports get expensive, and your savings lose value. It sounds impossible, but this has happened before. The world has changed which currency it trusts more than once. There was a time when the US dollar was just another currency. It wasn't special. It wasn't the world standard. Britain ruled global trade, and the pound sterling was the money everyone wanted. But that changed. The dollar rose, the pound fell, and America's money became the backbone of the global economy. How did that happen? Why did the world choose the dollar? And what does that choice mean for all of us now? Let's go back to the beginning. Before America even existed, the word dollar came from an old European coin called the thaler, named after a valley in what now the Czech Republic. Spanish silver coins based on that design circulated throughout the colony. These coins were trusted and widely used. When the United States gained independence, it decided to create its own version. In 1792, Congress passed the Coinage Act, officially creating the US dollar. The dollar was tied to gold and silver, giving it a clear value. It was a small step in building a young nation's credibility, but at that time, the real financial power was Britain. The pound sterling dominated global trade because the British Empire controlled most of the world's major shipping routes and colonies. If you traded goods overseas, you almost always dealt in pounds. Then came the 20th century, and everything started to shift. World War drained Europe's economy. Countries that once lent money were now drowning in debt. Gold reserves dwindled. Britain was struggling to maintain its empire. Meanwhile, the United States was booming. It became a major supplier to Europe, selling weapons, food, and raw materials during the war. Gold began to flow into American banks, making the US richer and more stable than its allies. After the war, the world tried to rebuild. The 1920s saw economic ups and downs, but the US was clearly rising. Then the Great Depression hit, and confidence in global currencies collapsed. Governments scrambled to protect their economy. Many abandoned the gold standard altogether. Through all of it, the United States managed to keep its footing better than most. When World War II began, the global balance shifted again. By 1945, Europe was in ruins. Cities were destroyed, industries were gone, and national debts were massive. The United States, on the other hand, had become the industrial engine of the world. Its factories were intact, its military strong, and its gold reserves enormous. In 1944, as the war was ending, 44 nations met in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, to decide how to rebuild the global financial system. The result was the Bretton Woods Agreement. Under this system, a currency would be linked to the US dollar, and the dollar would be linked to gold at a fixed rate of $35 an ounce. In other words, if you held dollars, you could exchange them for gold. That made the dollar as good as gold and more convenient. The world now had a new anchor, and it wasn't the British pound anymore. No 13. The US dollar became the foundation of the global economy. Countries used it for trade, kept it in their reserves, and borrowed in it. For America, this was an incredible advantage. The government could spend more, borrow more, and issue debt, knowing that other countries wanted its currency. But this arrangement also created pressure. By the 1960s, the US was spending heavily on both the Vietnam War and domestic program. Dollars were flowing out of the country faster than gold could back them. Other nations began to question whether the US could really keep its promise to redeem dollars for gold at $35 an ounce. The numbers didn't add up. There were far more dollars in circulation than gold in US vault. On August 15, 1971, President Richard Nixon made a bold move. He announced that the United States would suspend the dollar's convertibility into gold. From that day forward, the dollar would no longer be tied to any metal. It would be worth whatever people believed it was worth. This decision effectively ended the Bretton Woods system. It was a shock to the world. Without gold, the dollar could have collapsed. Instead, it survived and even grew stronger. Why? Because the global economy was already built around it. Countries needed dollars to trade. They used them to buy oil, food, and raw materials. Even if gold was gone, there was no practical alternative. This is where the modern financial order was born, the petrodollar system. Oil producing countries agreed to price oil in US dollar. That meant every nation on Earth needed dollars to buy energy. The demand for dollars became permanent. This arrangement gave the United States enormous influence. When America printed more money or raised interest rates, the effects rippled around the world. Other countries had to adjust their policies based on what the US did, not the other way around. But this dominance also made the global system fragile. Many developing nations borrowed in dollars. When the dollar rose in value, their debt became harder to pay. When the US economy slowed, it dragged others down with it. Over the years, several challengers have tried to take the dollar's place. When the euro was introduced in 1999, some thought it could replace the dollar as the world's reserve currency. It didn't. Europe's debt crises and political divisions undermined confidence. China's yuan is another candidate, but China still controls its currency too tightly. Investors don't fully trust a system that can't move freely. Russia and other countries have called for de-dollarization, using their own currencies in trade. But despite the talk, the dollar remains the world's most used and most trusted currency. Today, the dollar makes up about 58% of global foreign exchange reserve. More than half of all international trade invoices are in dollars. Even when the US isn't directly involved, trillions of dollars move across global markets every day. The dollar's dominance has benefits for the US: lower borrowing costs, steady demand for its debt, and enormous geopolitical power. But it also creates risks. America's decisions now affect everyone. When the Federal Reserve raises interest rates, emerging economies feel the shock. When Congress fights over the debt ceiling, global markets tremble. And yet, the same pattern that brought the dollar to power could one day bring it down. The British pound was once unshakable. It lost its dominance after 2 world wars and mounting debt. The US faces similar long-term pressures: rising deficit, political division, and growing competition from emerging economies and digital currencies. The next shift may already be underway, quietly and slowly. Central banks are experimenting with digital money. Countries are diversifying their reserve. The idea of a single global currency may fade, replaced by several regional powers. Still, it's hard to imagine the dollar disappearing anytime soon. Replacing it would take decades. The world's financial infrastructure, trade system, and debt markets are all built around it. But history teaches us that nothing in finance lasts forever. Every dominant currency has its rise, its peak, and its decline. The dollar's story is still being written, but the ending will depend on one thing: trust. Trust is what keeps money valuable. Not gold, not paper, but belief. Belief that the system will hold, that debts will be paid, that institutions will endure. If that trust fades, if America loses credibility, then the world will look for something else. But what can we take from all of this? First, money is not just an economic tool, it's a measure of power. The dollar became the world's currency because the US was strong, stable, and trusted when others were not. Second, dominance always comes with consequences. America's control over the global financial system gives it leverage, but it also makes the world vulnerable to its choices. And third, no currency reigns forever. Britain learned that. Every global power eventually gives way to another. The question isn't if that happens again, it's when. If the US keeps its economy stable and its institutions credible, the dollar could remain dominant for generations. But if trust erodes, history will repeat itself. If this story gave you something to think about, subscribe, share it with a friend, and leave a comment below. Do you think the dollar will stay on top? Or is the next global currency already waiting in the wing? Number 38. Thanks for watching. Stay curious, stay informed, and remember, money isn't just about value. It's about who the world believes in.